I thought receiving my sister's engagement party invitation would be one of the happiest moments of the year. Sarah and I had always been close, and despite the changes I noticed in her since she started dating David Wellington, I was genuinely excited to celebrate this milestone with her. She used to admire the simple but happy life James and I had built together, always saying how she hoped to find the same contentment someday. Now she had found love with this successful businessman, and I could not wait to meet him properly and welcome him into our small family. The elegant invitation promised an evening of joy and celebration. Before I share what happened that night, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you will want to see how this story unfolds, because what happened next completely changed everything I thought I knew about my sister. Let me paint you a picture of our family dynamics first. At 32, I work as an elementary school teacher, pouring my heart into shaping young minds every single day. My husband James, who is 34, works as a mechanical engineer at a small but respectable firm downtown. We have been married for 5 wonderful years, living in our cozy little house with its white picket fence and flower garden that I tend every weekend. Our life might not be glamorous, but it is filled with love, laughter, and genuine happiness. My sister Sarah is 4 years younger and works in marketing for a trendy fashion company. We grew up together after our parents passed away in a car accident when I was 25 and she was 21. During those difficult years, we leaned on each other completely. I helped her through college, and she would spend every holiday at our house playing board games with James and me, helping me cook Sunday dinners and sharing her dreams about finding someone special. Everything began to shift about 8 months ago when Sarah met David Wellington at a charity gala her company sponsored. David is the CEO of Wellington Properties, one of the most successful real estate development companies in our city. From the moment she started dating him, I watched my down-to-earth sister gradually transform. She began obsessing over designer handbags, started getting her nails done weekly at expensive salons, and suddenly developed very specific opinions about wine and restaurants I had never heard of. The changes were subtle at first. She would mention needing to shop for the right outfit for David's business dinners, or how she was learning about art because his family collects it. Phone calls that used to last for hours became brief check-ins where she seemed distracted. When she did visit, she would fidget with her new jewelry and talk mostly about David's world, his friends, his family's summer house in the Hamptons, and the exclusive events they attended together. When James and I decided on her engagement gift, we spent considerable time choosing something meaningful within our budget. We settled on a beautiful handcrafted ceramic dinnerware set from a local artisan costing us about $200. It was elegant, practical, and made with love by someone in our community. James borrowed his brother's navy suit because buying a new one was not in our financial plan right now, especially with the roof repairs we had been saving for. I chose my reliable black dress, the same one I wore to my cousin's wedding 3 years ago, but it still looked elegant and appropriate. The night before the party, Sarah called to remind us about the dress code. Her tone seemed different, almost formal. She suggested we should dress up properly and mentioned that David's family and friends would be there. There was something in her voice that made me feel slightly anxious, though I could not put my finger on what it was. She asked specifically what James planned to wear and seemed relieved when I mentioned the borrowed suit. The engagement party was held at Ocean View Resort, a 5-star venue perched on cliffs overlooking the Pacific. As our modest sedan pulled into the valet area between luxury cars that cost more than our annual salaries, I felt the first flutter of nervousness. The resort itself was breathtaking with its grand entrance adorned with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers that cast dancing lights across marble floors. Inside the ballroom, my breath caught at the sheer opulence. Enormous floral arrangements towered on every surface, and servers in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne that probably cost more per bottle than we spend on groceries in a week. The guest list clearly consisted of people from a completely different social circle than any gathering Sarah had ever hosted before. Women glided past us in designer gowns, their jewelry sparkling under the soft lighting, while men in custom-tailored suits discussed business deals and vacation homes. James squeezed my hand reassuringly as we approached the reception area. We had dressed appropriately by any normal standard, but in this crowd, we felt underdressed and out of place. Some guests glanced at us with polite curiosity, and I caught a few subtle looks that seemed to be appraising our appearance and finding us lacking. When Sarah finally appeared, I barely recognized her. She wore a stunning, custom-designed white dress that fit her perfectly, complemented by diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and her makeup looked professionally applied. She looked absolutely radiant, but there was something different about her demeanor. When she hugged me, it felt stiff and performative, and her smile did not quite reach her eyes the way it used to. The first real shock came when the event coordinator, a woman with a clipboard and a Bluetooth earpiece, approached us with a somewhat apologetic expression. She informed us that we were seated at table 14 and began leading us toward the back corner of the ballroom. As we walked through the room, I noticed that the tables closer to the stage were beautifully decorated with elaborate centerpieces and had much better views of where Sarah and David would be standing. Table 14 sat in the farthest corner, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar and uncomfortably close to the kitchen doors. The constant flow of servers made conversation difficult, and we could barely see the main stage where the evening's events would unfold. The table setting was simpler than those I had glimpsed near the front, and it felt distinctly like we had been relegated to the least desirable section of the venue. James tried to make light of the situation, joking that at least we would be first to see the food coming out, but I could see the hurt in his eyes too. Looking around our table, I realized we were seated with Mrs. Thompson, an elderly friend of our late mother who lived on a fixed income, and a few other people who seemed equally out of place among the glamorous crowd. It felt like a deliberate grouping of the less affluent guests, tucked away where we would not interfere with the main social dynamics of the evening. As the evening progressed, my discomfort grew into something deeper and more painful. From our distant vantage point, I watched Sarah glide through the crowd, with David introducing him to various guests with obvious pride and enthusiasm. She seemed completely at ease in this sophisticated environment, laughing at jokes I could not hear and engaging in conversations that appeared far more animated than our brief, awkward greeting earlier. What struck me most painfully was the deliberate way Sarah seemed to be avoiding our section of the room. She moved through every other area of the ballroom, spending time at each table, sharing stories and accepting congratulations. Yet she never approached table 14, never introduced James and me to her new social circle, and never acknowledged our presence to the other guests. David Wellington was exactly as I had imagined from Sarah's descriptions. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with the quiet confidence that comes from a lifetime of privilege. His handshake was firm when we briefly met during the receiving line, but his attention quickly moved past us to the next guest. He seemed polite enough, though somewhat distant, and I noticed he had a habit of checking his expensive watch during conversations. During the cocktail hour, I attempted to mingle with some of the other guests. Most conversations were pleasant but superficial, focusing on topics I had little experience with, like private school recommendations, vacation properties, and exclusive clubs. Several people asked what I did for work, and when I mentioned teaching elementary school, Their responses were politely positive but brief before they moved on to discuss more exciting careers. Mrs. Thompson, our table mate, shared her own observations about the evening. She had known our family for years and was clearly puzzled by the seating arrangement. She whispered that she felt like she was being hidden away because she did not fit the image Sarah was trying to project. Her words stung because they confirmed what I was beginning to suspect myself. The most heartbreaking moment came when I overheard Sarah talking to a group of well-dressed women near the bar. She was discussing her new life with David, describing weekend trips to wine country, charity galas, and cultural events. She spoke about her transformation over the past year as if she had emerged from some unfortunate previous existence into this wonderful new reality. The way she told it, her life had truly begun when she met David, with no mention of family childhood memories or the support system that had helped her reach this point. I learned from overhead conversations that the Wellington family was indeed one of the most prominent in our city. David's father owned multiple businesses, his mother served on several prestigious charity boards, and the family name appeared on buildings and endowments throughout the area. Sarah was clearly working hard to prove she belonged in this elevated social stratum. The formal program began with David's father offering a toast about welcoming Sarah into their family. His speech was warm but formal, focusing on her professional accomplishments and her positive influence on David. Sarah then took the microphone to address the crowd, and I listened with growing devastation as she spoke. She thanked David's family for their acceptance and spoke glowingly about her wonderful new life. She mentioned her gratitude for all the amazing people she had met and the incredible opportunities that had opened up for her. She talked about looking forward to a bright future filled with new adventures and experiences. What she did not mention was family childhood, our parents, or any acknowledgement of the people who had supported her before David entered her life. James reached over and took my hand as he watched tears forming in my eyes. He suggested quietly that we could leave early if I wanted to, that we had done our duty by attending and showing our support. But something inside me refused to just slip away quietly. I needed to understand what was happening and why my sister seemed to be erasing our shared history. I made the difficult decision to approach Sarah directly, despite knowing it would likely create an uncomfortable scene. I waited until she had finished speaking with a group of David's business associates and was momentarily alone near the balcony doors. The walk across the ballroom felt like the longest journey of my life, with several people glancing curiously as I made my way through the elegant crowd in my simple dress. When I finally reached Sarah, she looked genuinely surprised and somewhat flustered to see me approaching. She glanced around nervously as if worried about who might be watching our interaction. I could see the tension in her shoulders as she forced a bright smile and asked if I was enjoying the party. I decided to address the situation directly, asking her why James and I had been seated so far from the main celebration and why she had not introduced us to David or any of her new friends. Sarah's response was initially defensive, claiming that the seating arrangements were handled by the venue coordinator and that she had no control over where people were placed. But as I pressed her gently for a real explanation, her facade began to crumble. She glanced around again to make sure we were not being overheard, then admitted that she had specifically requested we be seated away from David's family and close friends. Her reasoning, delivered in an uncomfortable whisper, was that our lifestyle differences might create awkward conversations or misunderstandings. Sarah explained that David's world was very different from what we were used to, and that his family and friends had certain expectations about social situations. She felt that our presence might raise questions about her background that she was not ready to address. She wanted to establish herself firmly in this new social circle before introducing complications from her past. The word complications hit me like a physical blow. I asked her directly if she was embarrassed by James and me, by our modest home, our ordinary jobs, our simple way of living. Sarah struggled to answer, looking increasingly uncomfortable as she searched for words that would not sound as hurtful as her actions had been. Finally, she admitted that she was trying to reinvent herself for David and his family. She felt that her previous life, while happy, did not measure up to the standards of the world she was trying to enter. She said she needed to prove she could fit in with sophisticated people before she could risk bringing up her more humble connections. I pointed out that we were not embarrassing people. James was a respected professional, I was a dedicated teacher, and we lived honest, dignified lives. But Sarah shook her head, explaining that it was not about our character, but about perception and social positioning. In David's world, she claimed these distinctions mattered more than I might understand. The conversation was becoming heated, despite our attempts to keep our voices low. Sarah grew more defensive, arguing that I could not understand the pressure she was under to prove herself worthy of David's love and his family's acceptance. She felt that any connection to her more modest background could undermine the image she was working so hard to build. Just as our discussion reached its most intense point, James appeared beside us. He had grown concerned when he noticed our serious expressions and body language from across the room. His timing could not have been more perfect or more devastating for Sarah's carefully constructed evening. David Wellington approached our small group just as James joined us. I could see Sarah's face pale as she realized her two worlds were about to collide in exactly the way she had been trying to prevent. David's expression was politely curious as he looked at James, and then something remarkable happened. David's eyes widened with recognition, and he extended his hand toward James with genuine enthusiasm. He asked if James was James Anderson, and when my husband confirmed his identity, David's entire demeanor changed to one of excitement and respect. David explained that he had been trying to locate James for months. 2 years ago, James had designed and supervised the construction of the original Ocean View Resort, the very venue where we were celebrating tonight. David had been following the project from its inception and was deeply impressed by the innovative engineering solutions James had implemented. The resort had won several architectural awards, and James's work had been featured in multiple industry publications. David had wanted to discuss a potential collaboration on a new development project, but had been unable to reach James through the proper channels because he worked for such a small firm. David continued praising James's professional reputation, mentioning specific details about the resort's design that demonstrated he had done considerable research into my husband's work. He spoke about James as one of the most talented engineers he had encountered and expressed frustration that they had never been properly introduced. Sarah stood frozen as David asked her why she had never mentioned that her sister was married to such an accomplished professional. The question hung in the air as David continued to express his admiration for James's innovative approach to sustainable building design. As word of this conversation began to spread through the nearby guests, several people approached to meet the engineer behind the resort's acclaimed design. James found himself the center of positive attention, with several business leaders expressing interest in his work and asking for his business card. Sarah watched in growing horror as her carefully maintained separation between her old life and new life completely collapsed. The very person she had been trying to hide was now being celebrated by the exact people she had been trying to impress. Her face grew increasingly pale as she realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. The atmosphere around our small group transformed completely as more guests learned about James's connection to the resort. David was genuinely excited about the possibility of working together and began discussing his current project in detail. He mentioned that he had been searching for an engineer with exactly James's expertise in sustainable design and innovative construction techniques. Sarah's carefully orchestrated social positioning crumbled before her eyes. The people she had been working so hard to impress were now focused entirely on my husband, asking thoughtful questions about his work and expressing genuine admiration for his professional accomplishments. Several guests mentioned having read about the Ocean View project in architectural magazines and expressed surprise that they had never heard Sarah mention this impressive family connection. David's confusion about Sarah's secrecy was evident in his repeated questions about why she had never brought James to previous social gatherings or mentioned his professional achievements. He could not understand why she had kept such an impressive family connection hidden, especially given his own interests in construction and development. The situation became increasingly uncomfortable for Sarah as she struggled to explain her behavior without admitting that she had been deliberately hiding her family out of social embarrassment. Her attempts at damage control only made her actions seem more inexplicable and hurtful. As the evening continued, several of David's business associates expressed interest in potentially working with James on future projects. What had begun as a celebration of Sarah's engagement had inadvertently become a networking opportunity for my husband with the very people Sarah had deemed too sophisticated for us showing genuine respect for his expertise and professionalism. I watched Sarah's transformation from confident hostess to increasingly anxious damage control throughout the rest of the evening. She tried desperately to regain control of the narrative, but the damage had been done. Her attempts to compartmentalize her life had not only failed, but had revealed something unfortunate about her character to the people whose approval she valued most. David's disappointment in Sarah became more apparent as the evening progressed. He clearly valued honesty and authenticity, and Sarah's deception about her family connections troubled him deeply. Several times I noticed him looking at her with confusion and what appeared to be disappointment. Rather than staying to watch Sarah's discomfort continue, James and I decided to leave the party gracefully. We thanked David for his kind words and interest in future collaboration, exchanged contact information, and said polite goodbyes to the other guests we had met. As we prepared to leave, I approached Sarah one final time. Instead of anger or triumphant satisfaction, I felt only sadness for what she had lost in her pursuit of social advancement. I told her quietly that I hoped she would find happiness in her new life, but that happiness built on denial of family and authentic relationships rarely lasted. We left the party with mixed emotions. While James's professional recognition had been gratifying, the personal cost was significant. I had learned something painful about my sister that would forever change our relationship. The realization that she valued social status more than family loyalty was devastating. In the weeks that followed, Sarah attempted to repair the damage through phone calls and text messages. She claimed that the pressure of fitting into David's social circle had overwhelmed her judgment and that she never intended to hurt us so deeply. However, her explanations felt hollow because they focused more on justifying her behavior than on understanding its impact. The experience taught me valuable lessons about self-worth and authentic relationships. I realized that seeking approval from people who would judge us based on superficial criteria was pointless and ultimately destructive. True acceptance had to be based on genuine appreciation for who we are as people, not what we own or how we appear to others. James and I decided to focus our energy on relationships and activities that valued our authentic selves rather than trying to meet arbitrary social standards. We strengthened our friendships with people who appreciated us for our character kindness and shared values rather than our economic status or social connections. The distance between Sarah and me remained significant, even after her attempts at reconciliation. While I forgave her actions, I could not forget what I had learned about her priorities and values. Trust, once broken in such a fundamental way, required time and consistent positive actions to rebuild. Worth is not measured by bank accounts or designer clothes. It is measured by character kindness and how we treat the people who love us unconditionally. Sometimes the people we think know us best are the ones who see us least clearly. But that says more about them than it does about us. What would you do if your family treated you this way at such an important event? Have you ever experienced being judged based on your financial situation rather than your character? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, because I would love to hear your perspectives on family loyalty versus social pressure. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming difficult family dynamics. Share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by their bank account. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you to always value the people who love you for exactly who you are.